They told her women didn't have the reflexes for fifth-generation fighters, that the F-22 Raptor was too advanced, too dangerous for female pilots. 6 months later, Captain Elena Vasquez became the first woman to fly the world's most lethal air superiority fighter. Then the Pentagon buried every record of it ever happening. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond the chain-link fence that separated Nellis Air Force Base from the outside world, its barren landscape offering no hint of the cutting edge. Aircraft that called this place home. Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cool glass of the operations building window, watching as a formation of F-22 Raptors taxied toward the runway with the predatory grace of mechanical sharks. Even at this distance, she could feel the raw power emanating from those twin Pratt & Whitney engines, each one capable of producing over 35,000 pounds of thrust. Elena had been stationed at Nellis for 18 months, officially serving as an F-16 instructor pilot with the 64th Aggressor Squadron. On paper, it was a prestigious assignment. The aggressors were responsible for training the Air Force's elite fighter pilots by simulating enemy tactics and aircraft capabilities. In reality, Elena knew she was being warehoused, kept safely away from the advanced fighter programs that remained stubbornly closed to women, despite the official policy changes that had supposedly opened all combat roles. The sound of approaching footsteps made her turn away from the window. Colonel Marcus Webb, the wing commander, entered the briefing room with his characteristic purposeful stride. Webb was old-school Air Force, a pilot who had cut his teeth flying F-15 Eagles during the Gulf War and had little patience for what he called social engineering experiments in fighter aviation. His weathered face bore the permanent squint, lines of someone who had spent decades staring into hostile skies, and his steel-gray hair was cropped so short it looked like it had been painted on his skull. "Vasquez," he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from her at the metal conference table. "I've been reviewing your file." Elena straightened in her chair, maintaining the professional composure that had served her well throughout 8 years of military service. She had learned early in her career that showing emotion, any emotion, in front of superior officers was often interpreted as evidence that women were too unstable for high-stress combat roles. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. Webb opened a manila folder thick enough to contain her entire military history. Top 5% at the Air Force Academy, distinguished graduate from pilot training, exceptional ratings in every aircraft you've flown. Your F-16 qualification scores were some of the highest on record. He looked up from the file, his pale blue eyes assessing. Your squadron commanders consistently rate you as one of the most tactically proficient pilots they've supervised. Elena felt a familiar mixture of pride and frustration. The praise was genuine. She had worked twice as hard as her male counterparts to earn recognition that came naturally to them. But she also knew that exceptional performance in acceptable roles was often used as justification for keeping women out of more advanced positions. The underlying message was always the same. You're very good at what you're allowed to do, so why risk spoiling it by reaching for something more? "Thank you, sir," she said, waiting for the inevitable however that would explain why her record, no matter how exemplary, wasn't quite enough for the next level. Webb closed the file and leaned back in his chair. "I've also been reviewing the F-22 program's pilot selection criteria. As you're aware, the Raptor represents the pinnacle of air superiority technology, stealth capabilities, supercruise performance, and sensor fusion that gives our pilots an unprecedented advantage in air-to-air combat. The aircraft is extraordinarily complex, requiring pilots with exceptional spatial awareness, lightning-fast decision-making abilities, and the physical tolerance to handle sustained high-G maneuvering." Elena nodded, though she wondered where this conversation was leading. She had memorized every published specification of the F-22, had studied its tactical employment in classified scenarios, and had even sat in the cockpit during static displays when security protocols permitted. The Raptor was everything Webb described and more, a fighter jet so advanced that Congress had actually prohibited its export to allied nations for fear that its technology might be compromised. The selection process for F-22 pilots has traditionally focused on candidates from the F-15 and F-16 communities, Webb continued. Pilots with proven air-to-air combat experience and demonstrated proficiency in beyond visual range engagements. Elena felt her heart sink. This was the familiar refrain. F-22 slots went to pilots who already flew air superiority fighters, and those positions remained overwhelmingly male. It was a circular logic that ensured the most advanced aircraft stayed in the hands of the same demographic that had always controlled them. Webb reached into his briefcase and withdrew another folder, this one marked with classification stamps. That made Elena's pulse quicken. However, there's been a development in the program that requires a different approach to pilot selection. Elena tried to keep her expression neutral, but she felt a spark of something that might have been hope. In her experience, developments in classified programs either meant someone was in serious trouble or extraordinary opportunities were about to emerge. The F-22 program has encountered some unexpected challenges with pilot retention, Webb said, his voice dropping to the level required for discussing sensitive information. Several of our most experienced Raptor pilots have been selected for promotion to staff positions. Others have reached the end of their service commitments, and 2 were lost in a training accident last month. Elena had heard rumors about the training accident, something involving a mid-air collision during a classified exercise, but the details remained tightly controlled. The loss of any pilot was tragic, but losing F-22 aviators represented the destruction of investments worth millions of dollars in training and years of accumulated tactical knowledge. The program office is under pressure to maintain operational readiness while expanding the pilot pool, Webb continued. They're looking for candidates who can think outside conventional parameters, who have the technical expertise to master complex systems, and who can adapt quickly to revolutionary tactical concepts. Elena felt her breathing slow as she began to understand the implications of Webb's words. The F-22 community needed pilots, and the traditional sources weren't providing enough qualified candidates. That meant they might be forced to look beyond their usual recruiting grounds, possibly even considering pilots who didn't fit the standard profile. "Sir," she said carefully, "are you suggesting that women might be considered for F-22 training?" Webb's expression remained unreadable. "I'm suggesting that exceptional pilots might be considered for F-22 training, regardless of demographics that have traditionally excluded them from such programs." The distinction was important, Elena realized. Webb wasn't advocating for gender equality or making any political statements about women in combat. He was identifying a practical problem, the need for qualified pilots, and acknowledging that artificial restrictions might be preventing the Air Force from accessing the best available talent. The selection process would be extremely rigorous, Webb warned. Psychological evaluations, physiological testing, technical examinations, and flight evaluations that would challenge even our most experienced pilots. The failure rate for F-22 training is already significant, and the standards would not be lowered for any candidate, regardless of their background. Elena nodded, understanding the subtext. If she were selected for F-22 training, she would be under microscopic scrutiny from people hoping to prove that women couldn't handle advanced fighter aircraft. Every mistake would be amplified, every success minimized, and her performance would be used to justify future decisions about female pilots in similar roles. "There's something else you need to understand," Webb said, his voice taking on a gravity that made Elena focus completely on his words. "This would be a test program, not a permanent policy change. If selected, you would be flying under experimental protocols with enhanced security measures. Your training and operational activities would be classified at levels that would prevent public disclosure. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Webb was describing a program so sensitive that her participation would be essentially invisible to the outside world. If she succeeded, the achievement might never be officially acknowledged. If she failed, her failure could be used to justify excluding women from advanced fighter programs for years to come. "Why me, sir?" she asked finally, preparing and narrating. This type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Webb reopened her personnel file and pulled out a single sheet of paper covered with performance metrics and evaluation scores. "Because according to every objective measure we have, you're one of the finest pilots in the Air Force. Your technical knowledge is encyclopedic, your tactical instincts are exceptional, and your flight discipline is flawless. More importantly, you've consistently performed at the highest levels while facing pressures and scrutiny that most pilots never experience." Elena stared at the evaluation sheet, seeing numbers and ratings that represented years of dedication and sacrifice. Every perfect score had come at the cost of personal relationships, social activities, and the normal experiences that defined most people's 20s. She had chosen excellence over ease, achievement over acceptance, and now that choice was creating possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Webb leaned forward, his expression intense. "Captain Vasquez, I'm offering you the opportunity to compete for a position in the most advanced fighter program in the world. You would be working with technology that represents the absolute cutting edge of military aviation, flying an aircraft that can outperform anything else in the sky, and developing tactics that will define air warfare for the next generation." Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she forced herself to consider the offer rationally. This was the dream she had harbored since childhood, the goal that had driven every decision in her military career. But it was also a trap baited with everything she had ever wanted. Success would be hidden, failure would be publicized, and she would be carrying the hopes and fears of every woman who had ever wanted to fly fighters. "Sir," she said slowly, "what exactly would I be testing?" Webb's smile was grim. "Everything. Captain, you'd be testing whether a woman can master the F-22 Raptor, whether gender integration can work in the most demanding fighter program in the world, and whether the Air Force is ready to fully utilize its most talented pilots regardless of traditional restrictions." Elena looked out the window again, watching as the F-22s completed their taxi and lined up for takeoff. In a few moments, those aircraft would be climbing toward the stratosphere with a combination of power and grace that represented humanity's ultimate expression of controlled flight. The pilots strapped into those cockpits were living her dream, experiencing sensations and capabilities that she could only imagine. "What's the timeline, sir?" she asked. "The selection process begins Monday. If chosen, you would start ground school in 6 weeks, followed by simulator training, then actual flight training. The entire program would take approximately 8 months, assuming satisfactory progress at each stage. 8 months to master the most complex fighter aircraft ever built, to prove that gender was irrelevant to piloting excellence, and to potentially change the future of military aviation. Elena thought about the weight of expectation that would accompany such an opportunity, the knowledge that every flight would be scrutinized for evidence of success or failure. Webb gathered his files and stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Captain, this is not a favor or social experiment. This is a military necessity disguised as an opportunity. We need exceptional pilots, and our traditional recruiting methods aren't providing enough qualified candidates. You have the skills and experience we require, but more importantly, you have something most pilots lack." "What's that, sir?" "You've spent your entire career proving that conventional wisdom can be wrong. That experience might be exactly what the F-22 program needs. After Webb left, Elena remained at the conference table, staring at the empty manila folder he had forgotten. The silence in the room felt profound, broken only by the distant sound of jet engines as another flight of Raptors returned from their training mission. She thought about the path that had brought her to this moment, the countless hours of preparation for an opportunity that might never have come, and the realization that her entire career had been leading toward a decision she now had to make. The smart choice would be to decline. Her current position was secure, her reputation was established, and she could continue flying F-16s without the enormous risks that came with breaking new ground. But Elena had not built her career on smart choices. She had built it on the belief that excellence should be rewarded with opportunity, that artificial limitations served no one's interests, and that the only way to change a system was to prove it wrong. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found her father's number. Colonel Roberto Vasquez, retired, had flown F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam and had been Elena's first and most important mentor. He had taught her that military aviation demanded everything you had to give and offered no guarantees in return, but that the privilege of flying military aircraft was worth any sacrifice required to earn it. "Dad," she said when he answered, "I need to tell you about an opportunity that just came up." The selection process began at 05:00 hours, on a Monday morning that felt like the first day of the rest of Elena's life. She stood with 11 other pilots in a sterile briefing room, buried deep within a nondescript building at Edwards Air Force Base, California. The facility bore no external markings to indicate its connection to the F-22 program, and their escort had required them to surrender all electronic devices before entering the classified section. Colonel Rebecca Sterling commanded the room with the quiet authority of someone who had earned her position through demonstrated competence rather than political maneuvering. Tall and lean with prematurely gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun, Sterling had been one of the first women to fly F-15 Eagles in combat and had accumulated over 3,000 flight hours in air superiority fighters. Her presence sent a clear message that this selection process would be conducted without regard to traditional gender dynamics. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling began, her voice carrying the crisp precision of a veteran briefer, "you are here because you represent the top 1% of tactical fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. Each of you has demonstrated exceptional skill in your current aircraft and shown the potential to master systems significantly more complex than anything you've previously encountered." Elena glanced around the room, noting that she was one of only 2 women among the candidates. The other female pilot, Major Sarah Chun, was a weapons school graduate with extensive F-15C experience and a reputation for tactical innovation that had earned her recognition throughout the fighter community. The male candidates represented an impressive collection of credentials: test pilots, weapons school instructors, and combat veterans with combined flight hours that numbered in the tens of thousands. Sterling activated a wall-mounted display that showed a cutaway diagram of the F-22 Raptor's internal systems. The F-22 represents a quantum leap in fighter aircraft technology, stealth capabilities that render it effectively invisible to conventional radar systems, supercruise performance that allows sustained supersonic flight without afterburners, and sensor fusion that provides pilots with unprecedented situational awareness. Mastering this aircraft requires not just flying skills, but the ability to think in 3 dimensions while processing information flows that would overwhelm most human cognitive capacity. Elena studied the diagram, mentally cataloging the differences between the F-22's architecture and the fighter she had previously flown. The Raptor's design philosophy emphasized integrated systems over discrete components, meaning that pilots had to understand not just individual functions, but the complex interactions between multiple subsystems operating simultaneously. Selection process will consist of 4 phases: Sterling continued. Academic evaluation, psychological assessment, physiological testing, and flight evaluation. Standards will be identical for all candidates, and there will be no remedial training for those who fail to meet benchmarks. You will advance to the next phase only by demonstrating mastery of the previous one. The academic evaluation consumed the next 5 days, subjecting the candidates to examinations that covered everything from advanced aerodynamics to electronic warfare theory. Elena found herself immersed in technical material that pushed the boundaries of her engineering knowledge, studying sensor algorithms and stealth principles that had been classified beyond her previous clearance level. The F-22's capabilities were even more impressive than she had imagined, incorporating technologies that seemed almost like science fiction. Captain Mike Torres, an F-16 pilot from Luke Air Force Base, approached her during a study break on the third day. Torres had an easy confidence that came from years of success in competitive environments, and Elena had noticed him scoring consistently high on the technical examinations. "Vasquez," he said, settling into the chair beside her in the study room, "you're making the rest of us look bad. Word is you've been pulling 16-hour study sessions since we got here." Elena looked up from her textbook on radar cross-section calculations, noting the mixture of admiration and concern in Torres's expression. "Just trying to absorb as much information as possible," she replied diplomatically. Torres nodded, but his expression suggested deeper thoughts. "You know there are people watching this program who want to see you fail, right? Not because they dislike you personally, but because your failure would validate their beliefs about women in advanced fighters." Elena set down her book, recognizing that Torres was offering genuine advice rather than trying to intimidate her. "And there are people who want to see me succeed for equally political reasons," she said. "The pressure works both ways." "Maybe," Torres agreed, "but the consequences don't. If I wash out, it's just one pilot who couldn't cut it. If you wash out, it becomes evidence that no woman should fly the F-22. Elena appreciated Torres's honesty, even though his words crystallized fears she had been trying to suppress. The weight of representation was something male pilots never had to consider. Their individual performance was never extrapolated to make broad statements about their entire gender's capabilities. "Then I guess I'll just have to make sure I don't wash out," she said with more confidence than she felt. The psychological evaluation proved more challenging than Elena had anticipated. Dr. Amanda Richardson, the program's chief psychologist, conducted interviews that probed not just Elena's mental stability, but her motivation for pursuing advanced fighter training and her ability to handle the unique pressures that would accompany being a female F-22 pilot. "Captain Vasquez, Dr. Richardson said during their third session, your psychological profile indicates exceptionally high stress tolerance and remarkable emotional control under pressure. However, I'm concerned about the internal pressure you're placing on yourself to represent all women in military aviation." Elena shifted in her chair, uncomfortable with having her private thoughts subjected to professional analysis. "I understand that my performance will be scrutinized, but I'm here because I want to fly the F-22, not because I want to make political statements." Dr. Richardson made notes on her tablet before responding. "Your motivation is clear, but motivation alone doesn't eliminate the psychological burden of pioneering. Previous barrier-breaking pilots have struggled with perfectionism, social isolation, and the stress of constant evaluation. Are you prepared for the possibility that success might be more psychologically demanding than failure?" The question struck Elena as particularly insightful. She had spent so much time preparing for the possibility of failure that she hadn't fully considered the challenges that would accompany success. Being the first woman to fly the F-22 would mean living in a spotlight that could become its own form of imprisonment. "Doctor," Elena said after a moment of reflection, "I've been dealing with scrutiny and pressure my entire career. Every flight evaluation, every training exercise, every social interaction has been viewed through the lens of my gender. If anything, flying the F-22 might be liberating because the aircraft's performance requirements are so objective. Either I can fly it competently or I can't. Dr. Richardson smiled for the first time during their sessions. That's exactly the attitude that will serve you well in this program. The physiological testing pushed Elena's body to its absolute limits. The F-22's performance envelope subjected pilots to gravitational forces that could cause loss of consciousness. If they lacked the physical conditioning to maintain blood flow to their brain. Elena found herself strapped into a centrifuge that spun at velocities designed to simulate 9G turns while she attempted to maintain cognitive function and manual dexterity. Major Chun had warned her that the G-tolerance testing would be particularly challenging for smaller pilots, regardless of gender. The physics of gravitational force meant that blood had farther to travel in taller bodies, making them more susceptible to G-induced loss of consciousness. But it also meant that shorter pilots had to work harder to maintain muscle tension that would keep blood flowing to their brains. Elena gritted her teeth as the centrifuge accelerated, feeling her vision narrow and her body weight increase exponentially. At 6 Gs, she weighed over 1,000 pounds and could barely lift her arms. At 8 Gs, her vision began to gray around the edges and she felt consciousness slipping away. But at 9 Gs, the maximum the F-22 was likely to pull in tactical maneuvering, she managed to maintain awareness and complete the required tasks. "Outstanding performance, Captain," said the technician monitoring her vital signs. "Your G-tolerance scores are in the top 10% of all candidates we've tested." Elena climbed out of the centrifuge on shaking legs, proud of her performance, but acutely aware that she had passed only the preliminary tests. The real challenges would come when she was strapped into an actual F-22, processing tactical information while pulling Gs that made conscious thought feel like swimming through molasses. Dr. James Harrison, the program's senior flight surgeon, reviewed her medical data with the thoroughness of someone whose recommendations could end careers. "Captain Vasquez, your physiological responses indicate exceptional adaptation to high-stress environments. Your cardiovascular conditioning is superior. Your spatial orientation skills are in the 99th percentile. And your hand-eye coordination scores suggest you have the manual dexterity required for precision flying." Elena felt a surge of relief, knowing that the physiological standards were among the most difficult to overcome through training alone. Either your body could handle the demands of modern fighter aviation, or it couldn't, and no amount of determination could change basic biological limitations. However, Dr. Harrison continued, "I want to discuss something that doesn't appear in any manual or regulation. The F-22 pilot community is extremely close-knit, with social dynamics that can significantly impact operational effectiveness. You'll be entering an environment where your presence will change established patterns of interaction and communication." Elena nodded, understanding the doctor's concern. Fighter squadrons develop their own cultures over years of shared experiences, and introducing a new variable, especially one as significant as the first female F-22 pilot, could disrupt relationships that were crucial to mission success. "Doctor," she said, "I've been the only woman in numerous professional situations throughout my career. I've learned that focusing on mission accomplishment rather than social acceptance usually produces the best outcomes for everyone involved." Dr. Harrison made final notes in her file before closing it. "Captain, you have my recommendation for advancement to flight training. Your physiological and psychological profiles indicate you have the basic capabilities required for F-22 operations. Now you'll get to find out whether you can actually fly the aircraft." The flight evaluation would begin the following Monday, using T-38 Talons modified to simulate some of the F-22's handling characteristics. Elena would have to demonstrate not just basic flying competency, but the ability to adapt to aircraft. Systems that were fundamentally different from anything she had previously experienced. That weekend, she called her father to update him on her progress through the selection process. Colonel Vasquez listened without comment as she described the academic challenges, psychological evaluations, and physiological testing that had consumed the past 2 weeks. "Elena," he said when she finished, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished so far, but I want you to understand something important. The people evaluating you aren't just determining whether you can fly the F-22. They're deciding whether women belong in the most advanced fighter program in the world. That's a responsibility no pilot should have to carry, but it's the reality of your situation." Elena stared out the window of her temporary quarters at Edwards, watching as test aircraft conducted approach patterns in the distance. "Dad, what if I'm not good enough? What if I get to the flight evaluation and discover that all the preparation in the world can't overcome basic limitations I didn't know I had?" Her father was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Then you'll have learned something important about yourself and aviation." "But Elena, in 30 years of military flying, I've learned that most limitations exist in our minds rather than in our capabilities. The aircraft doesn't care about your gender, your background, or your fears. It only responds to competent inputs from a qualified pilot." Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made Southern California a mecca for flight testing. Elena stood on the ramp beside a T-38 Talon, its white paint gleaming in the early sunlight, while Lieutenant Colonel David Park conducted the pre-flight briefing that would determine whether she advanced to actual F-22 training. "Captain Vasquez," Park said, his voice carrying the professional neutrality of an experienced test pilot, "today you'll demonstrate your ability to adapt to unfamiliar aircraft systems while maintaining tactical awareness and flight discipline. The T-38 has been modified with displays and controls that approximate the F-22's interface, and you'll be flying scenarios that simulate actual operational requirements." Elena nodded, feeling the familiar pre-flight mixture of anticipation and nervous energy that had accompanied every important evaluation in her career. This was the moment when all the preparation, study, and physical conditioning would either prove sufficient or reveal itself as inadequate. "Sir," she said, "I'm ready to fly." The modified T-38 Talon felt alien beneath Elena's hands as she completed the pre-flight walk-around inspection. Every surface she touched, every system she checked carried the weight of dreams that had sustained her through 8 years of military service. The aircraft itself was familiar. She had flown T-38s extensively during pilot training, but the modifications were immediately apparent. Additional displays had been installed in the cockpit. New control interfaces replaced standard equipment, and the entire avionics suite had been upgraded to simulate the sensory environment of an F-22 Raptor. Lieutenant Colonel Park settled into the rear seat, his movements economical and precise. As the program's chief test pilot, Park had overseen the transition training for every F-22 pilot currently flying operational missions. His evaluation would carry enormous weight in determining whether Elena advanced to actual Raptor training or returned to conventional fighter assignments with her dreams permanently grounded. "Captain," Park's voice crackled through the intercom as Elena completed the engine start sequence. "Today's evaluation will consist of 3 phases. Basic aircraft handling to assess your adaptation to modified flight controls, tactical scenarios, to evaluate your decision-making under stress, and emergency procedures to test your ability to maintain aircraft control during system failures." Elena acknowledged the briefing while running through the pre-taxi checklist, her hands moving automatically through procedures she could perform blindfolded. The T-38's twin General Electric J85 engines spooled up with their characteristic high-pitched whine, and she felt the familiar vibration as the aircraft came alive around her. Edwards Tower, Raptor 01 requesting taxi clearance for evaluation flight. Raptor 01, cleared to taxi runway 22 left. Contact departure when ready. The taxi to the runway provided Elena with her first opportunity to assess the modified flight. Controls. The T-38 standard stick and rudder inputs had been altered to simulate the F-22's fly-by-wire system, where pilot inputs were interpreted by flight computers rather than directly controlling aerodynamic surfaces. The difference was subtle but significant. Instead of feeling the immediate response of mechanical linkages, Elena sensed a slight delay as the system processed her commands and translated them into appropriate aircraft movements. Notice anything different about the control response? Park asked as they held short of the runway threshold. Yes, sir. The inputs feel filtered, like there's a computer interface between my commands and the aircraft's actual movements. It's similar to the F-16's fly-by-wire system, but more sophisticated. Exactly right. The F-22's flight control system is constantly making micro-adjustments to maintain optimal performance and stealth characteristics. Pilots have to learn to work with the computers rather than fight against them. Elena received takeoff clearance and advanced the throttles, feeling the T-38 accelerate down the runway with eager responsiveness. At rotation speed, she eased back on the stick and felt the aircraft lift off with the smooth precision she remembered from her pilot training days. But as they climbed through 1,000 feet, the differences between this modified trainer and standard aircraft became increasingly apparent. The cockpit displays showed information formatted in ways she had never seen before. Instead of traditional analog gauges, the screens presented integrated data packages that combined navigation, threat assessment, and aircraft status into coherent pictures. Elena found herself drinking in information at a rate that challenged her cognitive processing abilities, trying to absorb tactical data while maintaining basic aircraft control. Captain, I want you to navigate to Waypoint Alpha while maintaining situational awareness of air traffic in the area, Park instructed. You'll notice that the navigation system presents information differently than what you're accustomed to. Elena studied the displays, noting that the waypoint appeared not as a simple bearing and distance, but as part of a three-dimensional tactical picture that included terrain features, airspace boundaries, and potential threat locations. The system seemed designed to present pilots with complete situational awareness rather than requiring them to mentally compile individual pieces of information. As she banked toward the designated waypoint, Elena felt the aircraft respond with crisp precision to her control inputs. The modified fly-by-wire system translated her intentions into smooth, coordinated movements that maintained optimal flight characteristics without the constant small corrections required in conventional aircraft. Excellent adaptation, Park commented. Most pilots take several flights to develop comfort with integrated displays and fly-by-wire controls. You're processing the information intuitively. Elena felt a surge of confidence, but she knew the evaluation was just beginning. Basic aircraft handling was only the foundation for more complex assessments that would test her ability to employ advanced systems under tactical stress. Phase 2 begins now, Park announced. You'll be intercepting simulated hostile aircraft while maintaining stealth protocols and employing beyond visual range tactics. Remember that situational awareness is more critical than aggressive maneuvering in fifth-generation warfare. The tactical scenario began with Elena's displays lighting up with threat symbols representing enemy aircraft approaching from multiple directions. Unlike the simple target presentations she was accustomed to from F-16 operations, the F-22 simulation provided detailed information about each contact's altitude, heading, speed, and probable aircraft type. The system seemed capable of tracking dozens of targets simultaneously while calculating engagement solutions and threat priorities. Elena found herself thinking in 3 dimensions. as she maneuvered to optimize her position relative to the simulated enemies. The F-22's stealth characteristics meant that aggressive turning wasn't always the best tactical option, sometimes maintaining course while allowing the aircraft's low radar signature to provide concealment was more effective than traditional fighter tactics. "Bandit at your 2 o'clock 20 miles hot," Park called out, using standard air combat terminology to indicate a hostile aircraft approaching their position. Elena located the target on her displays and began calculating an intercept course. The simulation's weapon systems interface was unlike anything she had experienced. Instead of manually designating targets and managing individual missile shots, the F-22 system seemed designed to automate many functions while keeping the pilot informed of tactical options. "I have the Bandit targeted," she reported, watching as the displays showed missile engagement parameters approaching optimal ranges. "Request permission to engage." "Cleared to engage. Simulate Fox 3, Park replied, using the call sign for beyond visual range missile shots. Elena activated the simulated weapon system, feeling the satisfaction of watching the target symbol change from hostile to destroyed as the computer calculated a successful engagement. But before she could savor the moment, 2 more threats appeared on her displays, approaching from different vectors and forcing her to rapidly reassess the tactical situation. The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of intercepts, evasive maneuvers, and split-second decisions as Park presented her with increasingly complex scenarios. Elena found herself managing multiple engagements simultaneously while maintaining awareness of fuel state, aircraft position, and mission objectives. The mental workload was extraordinary, requiring her to process information and make decisions at a rate that pushed the boundaries of human cognitive capacity. "Outstanding performance," Park said as the tactical simulation concluded. "You're thinking like a 5th-generation pilot rather than trying to apply 4th-generation tactics to advanced systems. That's a critical distinction that some experienced pilots never master." Elena felt sweat beading on her forehead despite the cockpit's climate control, recognizing that she had just been tested at levels far beyond anything in her previous experience. The F-22's capabilities were breathtaking, but they demanded intellectual agility and tactical sophistication that transformed air combat from a physical contest into a high-speed chess game. "Phase 3, Park announced, his voice taking on the ominous tone that indicated serious challenges ahead. "Emergency procedures. The aircraft will experience various system failures, and you'll need to maintain control while following appropriate checklists and executing emergency landings, if necessary." Elena had barely acknowledged the briefing when the cockpit erupted in warning lights and audio alerts. The displays showed multiple system failures, hydraulic pressure dropping, electrical systems malfunctioning, and engine parameters outside normal ranges. The aircraft immediately felt different in her hands, responding sluggishly to control inputs and requiring constant attention to maintain stable flight. "Engine fire, right engine," Elena called out, identifying the most critical emergency from among the cascade of failures. Her hands moved automatically to the emergency checklist, shutting down the affected engine while maintaining aircraft control with the remaining power plant. The T-38 wallowed through the air on single-engine power, its normally crisp handling degraded to barely manageable flight characteristics. Elena found herself applying lessons learned during emergency procedures training, prioritizing aircraft control over strict adherence to checklists while working to identify the nearest suitable landing field. Edwards approach, Raptor 01 declaring emergency, single engine failure, requesting vectors to nearest suitable runway. She transmitted, maintaining professional composure despite the stress of managing multiple system failures. Raptor 01, turn left heading 180, vectors for Edwards runway 04, emergency equipment is standing by. Elena banked the wounded aircraft toward the recovery heading, feeling the machine protest every control input. The simulation was extraordinarily realistic, forcing her to compensate for degraded performance while maintaining situational awareness and following emergency procedures. She could feel Park monitoring her every decision, evaluating not just her technical competence, but her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. The approach to Edwards proved challenging as the simulated failures continued to cascade. Elena found herself dealing with landing gear problems, backup flight control modes, and electrical systems that provided only minimal cockpit lighting. Each new challenge required immediate assessment and appropriate response while maintaining the precision flying necessary for a safe landing. Looking good, Raptor 01. You're on glide path. Continue approach. The tower controller advised as Elena lined up with the runway centerline. The landing was far from graceful. The T-38 contacted the runway with more force than Elena preferred, and the simulated brake problems required careful management to avoid losing directional control. But she brought the aircraft to a safe stop on the runway centerline, completing the emergency checklist while emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft in a choreographed response that demonstrated the professionalism of Edwards' crash and rescue teams. Simulation complete, Park announced as Elena completed the shutdown checklist with hands that were only slightly unsteady. Engine restart, normal systems operation. Elena felt the relief that always followed successful completion of emergency procedures training, but she also recognized that this evaluation had been more demanding than any previous test in her career. The combination of unfamiliar systems, complex tactical scenarios, and multiple emergency procedures had pushed her capabilities to their absolute limits. Captain Vasquez, Park said as they taxied back to the ramp, "I've been evaluating F-22 candidates for 6 years, and I can count on one hand the number who've performed at your level during their first flight in modified systems. Your adaptation rate is exceptional, your tactical thinking is sophisticated, and your emergency procedures execution was flawless." Elena felt a surge of elation, but she forced herself to remain professional. "Thank you, sir. The systems are incredibly advanced, but they seem designed to enhance pilot capabilities rather than replace pilot judgment." "That's exactly the right perspective," Park replied. "The F-22 is a pilot's aircraft that happens to be equipped with extraordinary technology. Pilots who try to let the computers fly the mission usually fail, while those who use the technology to enhance their own capabilities tend to excel." As they completed the post-flight procedures, Elena reflected on the morning's evaluation with a mixture of pride and humility. She had passed the most challenging flight test of her career, but she also understood that this was merely the beginning of an even more demanding journey. Park completed his evaluation forms with the methodical precision of someone whose recommendations carried enormous weight. "Captain, you'll receive official notification within 48 hours, but I want you to know that you've demonstrated the basic capabilities required for F-22 training. Whether you ultimately succeed in the program will depend on your ability to master systems even more complex than what you experience today." Elena climbed out of the cockpit, feeling physically and mentally drained, but emotionally energized by the morning's challenges. She had proven to herself and to the evaluation team that gender was irrelevant to flying advanced systems competently. The F-22 responded to skilled inputs from qualified pilots, regardless of their demographic characteristics. As she walked across the ramp toward the debriefing facility, Elena caught sight of the other candidates who were waiting their turns for evaluation flights. Their expressions ranged from nervous anticipation to confident preparation, and she realized that each of them was fighting their own battles with doubt and determination. Major Chun approached as Elena secured her flight gear, her expression curious but professional. "How did it go?" Elena considered her response carefully. knowing that sharing too much information might compromise the evaluation process for other candidates. Challenging, she said finally. The systems are more integrated than anything I've experienced, but they're also more intuitive once you understand the design philosophy. Chun nodded, understanding the diplomatic nature of Elena's response. Any advice for someone who's taking the evaluation tomorrow? Elena thought about the morning's lessons, the moments when she had succeeded, and the situations that had challenged her most severely. Trust the aircraft, she said. The systems are designed to help pilots make better decisions, not to replace pilot judgment. Use the technology to enhance your capabilities, rather than fighting against unfamiliar interfaces. That evening, Elena called her father to report on the day's evaluation. Colonel Vasquez listened without interruption as she described the modified T-38, the tactical scenarios, and the emergency procedures that had tested every aspect of her flying skills. How do you feel about your performance? He asked when she finished. Elena considered the question carefully, recognizing that her father's assessment would be based on decades of experience evaluating pilots under stress. I think I did well, but the standards are so high that I won't be confident until I receive official notification. Elena, her father said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had trained countless aviators. From what you've described, you just completed one of the most challenging flight evaluations in military aviation. The fact that you were able to discuss it coherently suggests you performed at a very high level. Elena felt the tension she had been carrying since morning begin to ease slightly. Her father's evaluation meant more to her than any official assessment, because he understood both the technical demands of advanced flight testing and the personal pressures she faced as a barrier-breaking aviator. Now comes the hard part, Colonel Vasquez continued. If you're selected for F-22 training, you'll be entering uncharted territory where your every action will be scrutinized and interpreted. Success will require not just flying skills, but the mental toughness to perform under pressure that most pilots never experience. Elena stared out her quarters window at the lights of Edwards Air Force Base, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment and the possibilities that lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring either disappointment that ended her F-22 dreams or acceptance into a program that could change the trajectory of her entire career. Either way, she had proven something important to herself. She could adapt to advanced systems, think tactically under pressure, and maintain aircraft control during complex emergencies. Whether that was sufficient for F-22 qualification remained to be seen. But Elena was confident she had given her absolute best effort. The phone rang at exactly 0800 hours the following morning. Captain Vasquez, this is Colonel Sterling. Report to Building 1847 at 0900 hours. Bring your gear. The line went dead before Elena could respond, leaving her staring at the phone with a mixture of anticipation and dread. In military communications, brevity usually indicated either exceptional urgency or news, so significant that extended discussion wasn't appropriate for unsecured phone lines. She had learned to interpret the subtle gradations of official tone during 8 years of service, and Sterling's voice carried the weight of decisions that would reshape Elena's future. Elena arrived at Building 1847 15 minutes early. Her duffel bag packed with everything she owned and her mind racing through possibilities. The nondescript concrete structure could have housed anything from administrative offices to classified laboratories, but the heavy security presence and restricted access signs suggested its contents were more sensitive than routine paperwork. Colonel Sterling met her in a conference room that smelled of fresh coffee and government-issued furniture polish. The walls were covered with photographs of F-22 Raptors in various configurations, some showing the aircraft's elegant lines against dramatic sky backgrounds, others displaying the complex internal systems that made fifth-generation warfare possible. Elena tried to read Sterling's expression for clues about her evaluation results, but the colonel's face revealed nothing beyond professional competence. "Captain Vasquez," Sterling began, gesturing for Elena to take a seat at the polished conference table. "Your performance during the selection process has been exceptional. Academic scores in 95th percentile. Psychological evaluation indicating superior stress tolerance and decision-making capabilities. Physiological testing demonstrating outstanding G tolerance and spatial orientation skills." Elena felt her heart rate accelerate, but she forced herself to maintain professional composure. Positive feedback was encouraging, but military evaluations often included praise before delivering disappointing conclusions. She had learned to wait for the complete assessment before allowing herself to feel either relief or celebration. Sterling opened a manila folder marked with classification stamps that Elena couldn't read from her position across the table. "Lieutenant, Colonel Park's flight evaluation was particularly impressive. He noted that your adaptation to advanced systems was faster than any candidate he's previously evaluated, and your tactical thinking demonstrated the kind of three-dimensional awareness that fifth-generation warfare requires." Elena nodded, remembering the intensity of the modified T-38 flight and the mental challenge of processing information at rates that pushed human cognitive limits. The evaluation had been the most demanding flight test of her career, but it had also been exhilarating in ways that conventional flying couldn't match. "However," Sterling continued, and Elena felt her stomach tighten at the inevitable qualifier, "your selection for F-22 training comes with conditions that are unprecedented in the program's history." Elena waited, understanding that Sterling was about to explain complications that would transform her achievement into something more complex than simple acceptance into advanced pilot training. "Captain, you will be participating in a classified test program designated Operation Silent Eagle. Your training and eventual operational flying will be conducted under enhanced security protocols that will prevent public disclosure of your participation. For all official purposes, your assignment will be listed as continuation training in F-16 operations. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel." Elena felt a chill of understanding. She was being offered the opportunity to fly the F-22, but that achievement would be invisible to the outside world. Success would be hidden, recognition would be impossible, and her breakthrough would exist only in classified files that might never see daylight. "Ma'am," Elena said carefully, "may I ask why the enhanced security is necessary?" Sterling's expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of the personal opinion that lay beneath her professional demeanor. "Captain, the decision to integrate women into F-22 operations is not universally supported within the Defense Department or Congress. There are influential people who believe that allowing women to fly the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world represents an unacceptable risk to national security." Elena understood the political dynamics Sterling was describing. Military aviation had always been a conservative institution where change came slowly and met resistance from traditionalists who viewed departures from established practices as threats to operational effectiveness. Her presence in the F-22 program would challenge assumptions that had guided fighter aviation for decades. "The compromise solution," Sterling continued, "is to allow you to complete training and operational assignments while maintaining official silence about gender integration in the program. If your performance validates the decision to include women in F-22 operations, the policy can be expanded. If problems arise, the program can be terminated without public acknowledgement that it ever existed." Elena absorbed the implications of Sterling's explanation, recognizing that she was being offered a devil's bargain. She could achieve her dream of flying the F-22, but only by accepting that her achievement would be officially erased. Future women who sought similar opportunities would have no knowledge of her precedent, no inspiration from her success, and no evidence that gender barriers had been broken. "Colonel," Elena said slowly, "if I accept these conditions, what happens? If I excel in the program, will there ever be recognition of what I've accomplished?" Sterling consulted documents in her folder before responding. "Captain, that decision will be made at levels far above my authority. Your performance will be carefully documented, and the results will influence future policy decisions. But official recognition may require political changes that could take years to develop." Elena thought about the conversation she'd had with her father about representing all women in military aviation. The pressure of that responsibility had seemed daunting when she thought her achievements would be public. Now she was discovering that the burden would be even greater. She would carry the hopes and fears of future female fighter pilots without the benefit of public acknowledgement if she succeeded. "Ma'am, what are the specific terms of the training program?" Sterling pulled out a thick document bound in red covers that indicated highly classified material. "You'll complete 6 months of intensive ground school at a classified facility, followed by 12 months of flight training in actual F-22 aircraft. Upon successful completion, you'll be assigned to an operational squadron for a minimum 2-year tour." Elena felt her pulse quicken as she contemplated 18 months of training in the world's most advanced fighter aircraft. The timeline was longer than conventional pilot transitions, reflecting the extraordinary complexity of F-22 systems and the elevated standards required for operational competency. "The training will be conducted at Groom Lake," Sterling continued, using the official designation for the facility more commonly known as Area 51. "You'll be part of a 4-person class that includes 3 male pilots with extensive fighter experience. The instructors are all seasoned F-22 pilots with combat deployments and test pilot backgrounds." Elena recognized the significance of training at Groom Lake, where the military's most sensitive aircraft development and testing occurred. The location would provide absolute security for her participation, while ensuring access to the most advanced training facilities available anywhere in the world. "Captain, I need to be completely honest about what you're accepting," Sterling sighed, her voice taking on a gravity that commanded Elena's full attention. "The F-22 is not just a more advanced version of aircraft you've previously flown. It represents a fundamentally different approach to air warfare that requires pilots to think in ways that conventional training doesn't address." Elena leaned forward, understanding that Sterling was about to describe challenges that would test every aspect of her capabilities as an aviator. The F-22's stealth characteristics mean that traditional visual combat maneuvering takes a secondary role to beyond visual range engagements conducted at distances where you'll never see your targets. The aircraft's sensor fusion capabilities provide situational awareness that can be overwhelming if you don't learn to filter information effectively. And the performance envelope allows sustained flight at altitudes and speeds that impose physiological stresses unlike anything in 4th-generation aircraft. Elena absorbed Sterling's warnings, recognizing them as professional advice rather than attempts at intimidation. The colonel was preparing her for challenges that would require every lesson learned during 8 years of military flying plus intellectual adaptability that would push her beyond established comfort zones. "Additionally," Sterling continued, "you'll be flying with pilots who have been skeptical about women in advanced fighter roles. They're professionals who will evaluate your performance objectively, but they're also human beings with preconceptions that may influence their interactions with you." Elena nodded, understanding that she would be proving herself not just to instructors and evaluators, but to peers, who might view her presence as either a validation of their doubts or a challenge to their assumptions. The social dynamics would be as demanding as the technical training. "Ma'am," Elena said, "I understand the challenges and the conditions. I want to proceed with the training." Sterling smiled for the first time during their conversation, and Elena caught a glimpse of the person behind the professional facade. "Captain, I hoped you would say that. I've been advocating for qualified women in F-22 operations for 3 years, and you represent the first opportunity to demonstrate that gender is irrelevant to flying advanced fighters." Elena felt the weight of expectation settling around her. Like a familiar coat, recognizing that she was accepting responsibility for more than her own career. Her performance would influence decisions about future opportunities for women throughout military aviation, and failure would have consequences, extending far beyond personal disappointment. Sterling handed her a set of orders that would officially transfer her to the classified training program. "Your cover assignment is continuation training for F-16 advanced tactics. Your family and friends will be told that you're attending a specialized course that requires minimal outside contact. Due to training intensity." Elena scanned the orders, noting the careful language that provided plausible explanations for her extended absence, while revealing nothing about the true nature of her assignment. The documentation was thorough enough to satisfy casual inquiry, while protecting the classification of her actual activities. "Transportation to Groom Lake departs at 1400 hours, Sterling informed her. "You'll travel on a military transport with the other training candidates and begin ground school Monday morning. The academic phase will cover F-22 systems, tactics, threat environment, and operational procedures that are unique to fifth-generation warfare." Elena felt excitement building as she contemplated the beginning of training that had seemed impossible just months ago. She was about to enter a world that few pilots ever experienced, learning to employ weapon systems and capabilities that represented the absolute pinnacle of military aviation technology. "Colonel," Elena said as she prepared to leave, "thank you for this opportunity. I won't disappoint you." Sterling stood and extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. "Captain, I'm not worried about disappointment. I've seen your records, evaluated your capabilities, and observed your character under pressure. You're going to succeed in this program because you have the skills and determination that F-22 operations require." Elena left the building with her orders in hand and her future transformed in ways she was still processing. She had achieved selection for the most exclusive pilot training program in the world, but under conditions that would keep that achievement secret from everyone she cared about. That afternoon, Elena made the most difficult phone call of her military career. "Dad," she said when Colonel Vasquez answered, "I've been selected for a special training program that will keep me away from regular contact for the next 18 months. "What kind of training?" her father asked, and Elena could hear the curiosity and concern in his voice. "I can't discuss the details, but it's an opportunity that could change the direction of my entire career. I wanted you to know that my communication will be limited and irregular, but that doesn't mean anything is wrong." Colonel Vasquez was quiet for a moment, and Elena knew he was processing the implications of a training assignment so sensitive that it required communication restrictions. "Elena, this is about the F-22, isn't it?" Elena hesitated, understanding that even acknowledging her father's guess could compromise operational security. "Dad, I can't confirm or deny anything about the program content. I can only tell you that I'm being given the chance to prove that I belong at the highest levels of military aviation." "Then you'd better prove it," her father said, his voice carrying the mixture of pride and concern that had guided Elena throughout her career. "Whatever you're about to undertake, remember that excellence is the only acceptable standard, and that you're carrying the hopes of every person who believes talent should be rewarded, regardless of traditional limitations." Elena ended the call, knowing that she wouldn't speak to her father again until her training was complete. The isolation would be one of many sacrifices required by her pursuit of opportunities that had been closed to women throughout aviation history. The military transport that carried Elena to Groom Lake was a study in functional efficiency rather than passenger comfort. She sat in canvas seats alongside 3 male pilots who would be her classmates for the next 18 months, studying their faces and wondering about the experiences that had brought them to this exclusive program. Captain Jake Morrison was a former F-15C pilot with over 1,500 hours in air, superiority fighters and combat experience from deployments to the Middle East. His relaxed confidence suggested familiarity with high-performance aircraft and comfort. In competitive environments where pilots were constantly evaluated against their peers, Major Tom Bradley had transitioned from F-16 operations and brought weapons school credentials that indicated exceptional tactical knowledge and leadership potential. His reserved demeanor suggested the kind of focused professionalism that characterized pilots who had succeeded in the most demanding military aviation programs. Captain David Kim was a test pilot with engineering degrees and experimental flight experience that made him uniquely qualified for learning advanced systems. His analytical approach to conversation suggested the methodical thinking that characterized pilots who specialized in expanding the boundaries of aircraft performance. Elena studied her new classmates while they traveled across the Nevada desert, recognizing that these men represented the best pilots the Air Force could identify for F-22 training. They would be her competitors, colleagues, and potentially her advocates or critics depending on how the training progressed. "So," Morrison said during a lull in conversation, "anyone want to speculate about what we're getting ourselves into?" Elena remained silent, understanding that discussions about classified programs were inappropriate even among authorized participants. But she was curious about her classmates' expectations and motivations for pursuing the most challenging pilot training available. "I've heard the F-22 makes everything else feel like a trainer," Bradley observed. "Pilots who transition from Raptors to other fighters say it's like going from a Formula One car to a pickup truck." Kim nodded thoughtfully. "The performance numbers are impressive, but I'm more interested in the systems integration. The F-22 represents a completely different philosophy of air warfare that prioritizes information over raw performance." Elena appreciated Kim's perspective, recognizing that understanding the F-22's design philosophy would be crucial to employing its capabilities effectively. The aircraft was built for pilots who could think tactically while processing information at superhuman rates, not for aviators who relied primarily on traditional flying skills. As their transport began its descent toward Groom Lake, Elena caught her first glimpse of the facility that would be her home for the next 18 months. The base appeared as a collection of hangars and buildings scattered across a vast dry lake bed, with runways that stretched toward distant mountains under a sky so clear it seemed artificial. Somewhere in those hangars sat F-22 Raptors waiting for her to learn their secrets. Elena felt her heart rate increase as she contemplated the beginning of training that would either fulfill her deepest ambitions or reveal limitations she had never acknowledged. The aircraft touched down on a runway that had witnessed the testing of every advanced military aircraft developed during the past 50 years. Elena was about to join that tradition, becoming part of a legacy that stretched from experimental jets to operational fighters that defended American airspace. As they taxied toward the terminal, Elena made a silent promise to herself and to every woman who might follow in her footsteps. She would master the F-22 Raptor not just competently but exceptionally, proving that gender was irrelevant to flying the world's most advanced fighter aircraft. The future of women in military aviation might depend on her success or failure over the next 18 months. Elena intended to make sure that future was bright. The ground school classroom at Groom Lake resembled a high-tech university lecture hall more than a traditional military training facility. Banks of computer monitors lined the walls, displaying real-time technical data from F-22 systems around the world. Holographic projectors created three-dimensional models of aircraft components that students could manipulate with gesture controls, examining internal structures and system relationships with unprecedented detail. Elena found herself immersed in an educational environment that represented the absolute cutting edge of military training technology. Colonel Marcus Reed commanded the classroom with the authority of someone who had personally developed many of the tactical procedures they would be learning. Reed had been among the first operational F-22 pilots, flying combat missions during the aircraft's initial deployments and contributing to the doctrinal evolution that defined fifth-generation warfare. His weathered face bore the characteristic marks of a pilot who had spent thousands of hours at high altitude, and his gray eyes held the intense focus that came from years of making split-second decisions in life-or-death situations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reed began, his voice carrying the crisp precision of a veteran instructor, "you are about to learn to fly an aircraft that represents the most significant advancement in air warfare since the introduction of radar. F-22 Raptor is not simply a faster, more maneuverable version of previous fighters. It is a weapon system that changes the fundamental nature of air combat." Elena leaned forward in her seat, absorbing every word while simultaneously studying the reactions of her classmates. Morrison appeared relaxed but attentive, his expression suggesting confidence in his ability to master whatever challenges lay ahead. Bradley took detailed notes with the methodical precision of someone who had learned to succeed through careful preparation. Kim's analytical gaze suggested he was already processing the implications of Reed's introduction, thinking several steps ahead to anticipate the complexities they would encounter. Reed activated the holographic display system, creating a life-sized cutaway model of the F-22 that rotated slowly in the center of the classroom. Elena had seen technical drawings and photographs of the aircraft's internal systems, but the three-dimensional representation revealed relationships and design philosophies that static images couldn't convey. The F-22's stealth characteristics are achieved through a combination of design features that work together to minimize radar signature, Reed explained, highlighting different sections of the holographic model. The angular fuselage deflects radar energy away from transmitting sources, while radar-absorbing materials convert electromagnetic energy into heat that dissipates harmlessly. Elena studied the aircraft's geometry, noting how every surface had been optimized to reduce detectability. The F-22's beauty was functional rather than aesthetic. Its elegant lines existed not for visual appeal, but to bend physics in ways that made the aircraft effectively invisible to enemy sensors. However, Reed continued, stealth is not invisibility. The F-22 can be detected under certain conditions, and pilots must understand the tactical limitations that stealth characteristics impose. Maintaining low observability requires specific flight profiles, weapon employment techniques, and communication protocols that are fundamentally different from conventional fighter operations. Elena realized she was beginning to understand the intellectual challenge that F-22 operations represented. Pilots had to think constantly about signature management, balancing stealth considerations against tactical requirements while processing information from sensors that provided unprecedented situational awareness. Reed spent the next 4 hours covering the F-22's propulsion system, explaining how the Pratt & Whitney F-119 engines provided supercruise capability that allowed sustained supersonic flight without afterburners. Elena absorbed technical details about thrust vectoring, engine management, and the fuel efficiency that gave the F-22 range and endurance advantages over previous fighters. Supercruise changes the tactical equation, Reed emphasized, displaying performance charts that showed the F-22's capabilities compared to other fighter aircraft. You can sustain Mach 1.5 indefinitely, allowing you to control engagement ranges and timing in ways that conventional fighters cannot match. But supercruise also imposes thermal and structural stresses that require constant monitoring and management. Elena felt her excitement building as she contemplated the performance envelope they would be exploring during flight training. The F-22's capabilities represented quantum leaps beyond anything she had previously experienced, promising flying that would challenge every aspect of her skills as an aviator. The afternoon session focused on the F-22 sensor systems, particularly the APG-77 radar that provided detection and tracking, capabilities that seemed almost magical compared to conventional fighter radars. Elena learned that the F-22 could track multiple targets at ranges exceeding 100 miles while maintaining its own stealth characteristics through low probability of intercept transmission techniques. The radar is only one component of the F-22's sensor suite, Reed explained, displaying a complex diagram showing information flows between multiple systems. Data fusion combines inputs from radar, infrared sensors, electronic warfare systems, and data link communications to create a comprehensive tactical picture that updates in real time. Elena studied the information architecture, recognizing that F-22 pilots had to process data streams that would overwhelm conventional human cognitive capacity. The aircraft systems were designed to assist pilot decision-making rather than replace pilot judgment, but the interface between human intelligence and artificial processing represented challenges she had never encountered. Reed introduced them to the concept of information warfare, explaining how F-22 pilots could share sensor data with other aircraft and ground stations through secure data link systems. Elena realized that fifth-generation warfare was as much about information superiority as kinetic destruction, requiring pilots to think like battle managers rather than individual fighters. Your job as an F-22 pilot, Reed emphasized, is not just to engage and destroy enemy aircraft. You will be gathering intelligence, coordinating with multiple agencies, and making tactical decisions that influence entire theater operations. The F-22 pilot is both a warrior and a sensor platform that provides critical information to commanders throughout the battle space. Elena felt the weight of responsibility that came with operating such advanced systems. F-22 pilots weren't just aviators. They were information processors, tactical analysts, and decision-makers whose actions could influence the outcome of entire campaigns. The weapon systems briefing revealed capabilities that Elena found almost unbelievable. The F-22 could carry 6 IM-12 missiles internally, maintaining stealth characteristics while possessing engagement capabilities that exceeded most conventional fighters' maximum loadouts. The internal weapons bays eliminated the radar signature penalties associated with external stores while providing protection for sensitive munitions. Internal carriage changes everything about weapons employment, Reed explained, showing animations of the F-22's weapon bay operations. You could approach targets undetected, engage multiple adversaries simultaneously, and egress without revealing your position to surviving enemies. Elena absorbed tactical concepts that seemed to come from science fiction rather than current military operations. The F-22's combination of stealth, speed, and weapons capacity created tactical options that previous generations of pilots could never have imagined. Reed spent considerable time discussing the challenges of beyond visual range combat, where engagements occurred at distances that prevented pilots from visually identifying their targets. Elena learned about identification procedures, rules of engagement, and the electronic warfare techniques that F-22 pilots used to verify target identity before weapon release. BVR combat requires absolute precision and target identification. Reed warned, his voice carrying the gravity of someone who understood the consequences of misidentification. The F-22's capabilities allow you to engage targets at ranges where visual confirmation is impossible, making electronic identification procedures critical to preventing friendly fire incidents. Elena understood the ethical and legal complexities. that accompanied advanced weapons capabilities. F-22 pilots wielded lethal force at distances that required complete trust in electronic systems and identification procedures, accepting responsibility for life and death decisions based on data rather than visual confirmation. The evening study session introduced Elena to the F-22's electronic warfare capabilities, systems that could jam enemy radar and communications, while protecting the aircraft from hostile electronic attack. She learned about frequency management, emission control, and the delicate balance between gathering intelligence and maintaining operational security. Captain Kim approached her during a break in the evening session, his expression thoughtful and professional. "Vasquez, I've been watching your performance during the academic sessions. You're processing this material faster than anyone I've seen." Elena looked up from her technical manuals, surprised by Kim's observation. "It's challenging material, but the system's integration is logical once you understand the design philosophy." Kim nodded, settling into the chair beside her in the study room. "I have a master's degree in electrical engineering and 3 years of test pilot experience, but you're making connections between systems that I'm still trying to understand. How are you absorbing this so quickly?" Elena considered Kim's question, recognizing that her learning approach might be different from her classmates' methods. "I think it helps that I don't have preconceptions about how fighter systems should work. I'm learning the F-22 as a completely new aircraft rather than trying to relate it to previous experience." Kim smiled, and Elena caught a glimpse of genuine respect in his expression. "That's actually brilliant. Morrison and Bradley are both struggling because they keep trying to apply F-15 and F-16 tactics to F-22 systems. You're learning 5th-generation warfare without the baggage of 4th-generation thinking." Elena felt a surge of confidence, recognizing that her relative inexperience with advanced fighters might actually be an advantage in mastering systems that required fundamentally different approaches to air combat. While her classmates were unlearning established habits, she was building new tactical concepts from scratch. The next morning brought their first introduction to F-22 simulators, training devices that replicated every aspect of the aircraft systems and performance characteristics. Elena settled into the simulator cockpit with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy, knowing that this represented her first opportunity to interact directly with F-22 systems. The simulator's visual display created a virtual world that was indistinguishable from reality, complete with accurate terrain features, weather conditions, and threat environments. Elena found herself looking at instrument panels that displayed information in ways she had never seen, with data presentations that seemed designed to enhance human decision-making rather than simply provide raw information. The F-22's cockpit is designed around the concept of situational awareness, explained Captain Lisa Morgan, their primary simulator instructor. Morgan was one of only 12 women who had been authorized to fly the F-22 in combat. Though her participation remained classified under the same protocols that would govern Elena's training, Elena felt a surge of connection with Morgan, recognizing that she was learning from someone who had faced similar challenges and proving that women could excel in advanced fighter operations. Morgan's presence provided both inspiration and practical guidance from someone who understood the unique pressures of being a female pilot in an exclusively male domain. Morgan guided Elena through the startup procedures, explaining how the F-22's systems initialized differently from conventional fighters. "Everything is automated to reduce pilot workload," Morgan explained. "But you need to understand what the systems are doing so you can intervene when necessary." Elena worked through the checklist with methodical precision, feeling the satisfaction that came from mastering complex procedures. The F-22 startup sequence was more intricate than anything she had previously experienced, requiring coordination between multiple computer systems and verification of countless status indicators. "Now we'll taxi to the runway," Morgan instructed. and you'll get your first feel for how the F-22 handles on the ground. Elena advanced the throttles and felt the simulator respond with the characteristic lag that indicated fly-by-wire control. Systems were interpreting her inputs. The F-22's ground handling was surprisingly docile, despite its reputation as a high-performance aircraft, responding to her commands with precision that made taxi operations feel effortless. The F-22 is actually easier to fly than most fighters, Morgan observed as Elena navigated toward the simulated runway. The flight control computers handle all the stability augmentation and performance optimization, allowing pilots to focus on tactical decision-making rather than basic aircraft control. Elena appreciated the design philosophy that prioritized pilot efficiency over traditional flying challenges. The F-22 seemed designed to amplify human capabilities rather than test human limitations, creating a partnership between pilot and machine that enhanced both components. The takeoff roll felt smooth and controlled as Elena advanced the throttles to military power and felt the F-22 accelerate down the simulated runway. At rotation speed, she eased back on the stick and experienced the unique sensation of flying an aircraft that seemed to defy conventional physics. "Notice how quiet it is," Morgan commented as they climbed through 10,000 feet. The F-22's engines are designed for reduced acoustic signature, making it difficult for enemies to detect the aircraft acoustically, even when radar stealth is compromised. Elena absorbed the tactical implications of acoustic stealth, recognizing another layer of the F-22's multidimensional approach to survivability. Every aspect of the aircraft's design contributed to reducing detectability through multiple sensor modalities. The first simulated air-to-air engagement proved both exhilarating and humbling as Elena attempted to apply conventional fighter tactics to an aircraft that operated according to completely different principles. She found herself thinking in 3 dimensions while managing information flows that challenged her cognitive processing capabilities. "Don't fight the aircraft," Morgan advised as Elena struggled with the tactical display. "Let the F-22 systems provide situational awareness while you focus on making strategic decisions about engagement timing and weapon employment." Elena gradually learned to trust the aircraft's systems while maintaining the pilot authority that distinguished human decision-making from automated responses. The F-22 required a partnership between pilot intuition and machine precision that created capabilities neither could achieve independently. As the simulator session concluded, Elena felt both exhausted and exhilarated by her first direct experience with F-22 systems. The aircraft represented challenges that would require months of training to master, but it also provided capabilities that transformed air warfare from individual combat to strategic influence. "How do you feel about your first flight?" Morgan asked as Elena completed the shutdown checklist. Elena considered the question carefully, recognizing that her answer would reflect both her confidence and her understanding of the challenges ahead. "It's the most complex aircraft I've ever experienced, but also the most intuitive. The system seemed designed to enhance pilot capabilities rather than replace pilot judgment." Morgan smiled, and Elena sensed approval in her expression. "That's exactly the right perspective. The F-22 will make you a better pilot, but only if you're willing to learn new ways of thinking about air combat." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena left the simulator facility with her mind buzzing from information overload and anticipation for the training that lay ahead. She was beginning to understand that mastering the F-22 would require not just learning new procedures but developing entirely new approaches to tactical thinking. That evening, she called her father from the secure phone in her quarters, carefully limiting her conversation to general comments about training progress without revealing specific details about the F-22 program. "Dad," she said, I wanted you to know that the training is everything I hoped it would be. Challenging, but exactly the kind of opportunity I've been preparing for my entire career." Colonel Vasquez's voice carried pride and concern in equal measure. "Elena, remember that excellence is a process rather than a destination. Focus on learning something new every day, and the overall success will take care of itself." Elena ended the call knowing that her father's advice would guide her through the months of intensive training ahead. She was embarking on a journey that would either fulfill her deepest ambitions or reveal limitations that ended her dreams of flying the world's most advanced fighter aircraft. Either way, she intended to give everything she had to prove that. Women belonged in the cockpit of the F-22 Raptor. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced the Nevada darkness at 0430 hours. But Elena was already awake, staring at the ceiling of her Spartan quarters while mentally rehearsing the emergency procedures she would face during her first actual F-22 flight. Today marked the transition from simulator training to the real aircraft, a milestone that represented both the culmination of months of preparation and the beginning of challenges that would test every aspect of her capabilities as a pilot. Elena, dressed in her flight suit with the ritualistic precision of someone who understood that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. At 50,000 feet, the Nomex fabric felt familiar against her skin, but the weight of expectation that accompanied this particular flight made even routine preparations feel momentous. She was about to become only the fifth woman in history to fly the F-22 Raptor, though her achievement would remain classified under protocols that ensured her breakthrough stayed invisible to the outside world. The pre-flight briefing room hummed with the controlled energy that characterized high-stakes military operations. Colonel Reed stood before a wall-mounted display showing weather conditions, airspace restrictions, and the complex flight profile that would introduce Elena to the F-22's actual performance characteristics. Captain Morgan sat at the briefing table, her role as chase pilot ensuring that Elena's first flight would be monitored by someone who could provide immediate assistance if unexpected situations developed. "Captain Vasquez," Reed began, his voice carrying the gravity that accompanied first flights in experimental aircraft. "Today's mission will consist of basic aircraft familiarization, handling characteristics evaluation, and initial systems integration. You'll be flying aircraft tail number 914003, which has been configured specifically for training operations." Elena absorbed the briefing details while managing the adrenaline that threatened to overwhelm her focus. After 8 months of ground, school and simulator training, she was finally going to experience the F-22's capabilities firsthand. The aircraft represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology, and she was about to join the exclusive community of pilots qualified to employ its revolutionary capabilities. Reed activated the tactical display, showing the restricted airspace where Elena's training flight would occur. "You'll remain within Nellis Range complex boundaries at all times, maintaining constant communication with range control and your chase aircraft. Any deviation from planned flight parameters will result in immediate termination of the mission." Elena nodded, understanding that her first flight would be conducted under conditions that provided maximum safety while allowing her to explore the F-22's basic handling characteristics. The training progression was carefully designed to introduce pilots to the aircraft's capabilities incrementally, building confidence and competence through controlled exposure to increasing complexity. "Weather conditions are optimal," Reed continued, "with clear skies, light winds, and unlimited visibility. The aircraft has been thoroughly inspected and all systems are functioning normally. You're cleared for a 1-hour flight consisting of airspeed and altitude familiarization, basic maneuvering, and landing practice." Elena felt her heart rate accelerate as the reality of the moment settled over her. In less than 2 hours, she would be strapping into the cockpit of the world's most advanced fighter aircraft, experiencing sensations and capabilities that only a handful of humans had ever known. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the opportunity to prove that gender was irrelevant to flying excellence. The walk to the flight line felt like a pilgrimage through aviation history. Elena passed hangars that had housed every significant military aircraft developed during the past 50 years, from experimental jets that had pushed the boundaries of flight to operational fighters that had defended American interests around the world. The F-22 represented the latest chapter in that continuing story of technological advancement and human achievement. Aircraft 914003 sat on the ramp like a sleeping predator, its angular lines and exotic materials creating an aesthetic that was both beautiful and menacing. Elena had studied photographs and technical drawings of the F-22 for years, but seeing the actual aircraft up close revealed details that static images couldn't convey. The jet's surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an almost supernatural appearance that hinted at its stealth capabilities. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez supervised the pre-flight inspection with the meticulous attention to detail that characterized personnel responsible for maintaining multi-billion-dollar aircraft. Rodriguez had been working on F-22 since the aircraft's initial operational deployment, accumulating experience with systems and procedures that remained classified beyond most people's clearance levels. Captain Vasquez, Rodriguez said as Elena began her walk-around inspection, "This bird has been prepared specifically for your flight. Every system has been checked and double-checked, and all maintenance actions have been completed to the highest standards." Elena conducted the external inspection with systematic thoroughness, examining every surface, connection, and component that would contribute to the aircraft's performance. The F-22's complexity was evident even from the outside, with access panels, sensor apertures, and control surfaces that revealed the sophisticated systems hidden beneath the aircraft's skin. The pre-flight inspection revealed design features that Elena had studied theoretically but was now seeing practically. The F-22's weapon bay doors were so precisely fitted that their seams were barely visible, maintaining the aircraft's stealth characteristics while providing access to internal armament. The engine inlets incorporated sophisticated features designed to shield the turbine blades from radar detection while maintaining optimal airflow for engine performance. "All external systems check out normally," Elena reported to Rodriguez, completing her inspection with the confidence that came from months of studying the aircraft specifications. "The aircraft is ready for flight." Rodriguez smiled, and Elena caught a glimpse of the pride that maintenance personnel felt when their work enabled pilots to accomplish extraordinary missions. "Captain, this is the finest aircraft ever built, and it's been prepared by the best maintenance team in the Air Force. Fly it with confidence." Elena climbed the boarding ladder and settled into the F-22's cockpit, feeling an immediate sense of connection with systems she had only experienced in simulators. The ejection seat molded itself to her body with precise ergonomics, while the instrument panels presented information in formats that seemed designed to enhance rather than overwhelm human decision-making capabilities. Captain Morgan's voice crackled through the radio as Elena completed the pre-start checklist. "Phantom 01, this is Chase 1, radio check." "Chase 1, Phantom 01 reads you 5x5, Elena replied, using the call signs that would identify their aircraft during the training flight. The communication protocols were identical to those she had practiced in simulators, but knowing that real aircraft and real consequences were involved added significance to every transmission. Elena worked through the engine start sequence with methodical precision, feeling the F-22 come alive around her as its systems initialized and began their complex interactions. The Pratt & Whitney F-119 engine spooled up with a sound unlike anything she had experienced, a deep, thrumming vibration that seemed to resonate through her entire body. Nellis Tower, Phantom 01 requesting taxi clearance for training flight. Elena transmitted, her voice steady despite the excitement that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. Phantom 01, cleared to taxi runway 21 left. Contact departure when ready. The taxi to the runway provided Elena with her first opportunity to experience the F-22's ground handling characteristics. The aircraft responded to her control inputs with precision that made maneuvering feel effortless, while the fly-by-wire flight control system translated her intentions into smooth, coordinated movements. "Looking good, Phantom 01, Morgan observed from her chase position. "Your taxi technique is smooth and professional." Elena felt a surge of confidence as she reached the runway threshold and completed the pre-takeoff checklist. Every procedure had been rehearsed countless times in simulators, but the reality of sitting in an actual F-22 added intensity that no training device could replicate. "Nellis Tower, Phantom 01 ready for departure." "Phantom 01, cleared for takeoff. Contact departure on guard." Elena advanced the throttles to military power and felt the F-22 surge forward with acceleration that pressed her back into the ejection seat. The runway markings blurred past as the aircraft reached rotation speed, and Elena eased back on the stick to experience her first actual F-22 takeoff. The sensation of leaving the ground in the F-22 was unlike anything Elena had previously experienced. The aircraft seemed to leap into the air with eager responsiveness, climbing at angles that defied conventional physics while maintaining smooth, controlled flight characteristics. The view from the cockpit revealed a world that suddenly seemed much smaller and more manageable. "Outstanding takeoff, Phantom 01, Morgan reported. "You're cleared to climb to flight level 300 and begin basic handling evaluation." Elena established a climb to 30,000 feet while marveling at the F-22's performance characteristics. The aircraft accelerated through the climb with power that made vertical flight feel natural, reaching altitudes that provided perspectives she had never seen from any other aircraft. The curvature of the Earth became visible at the edges of her vision, while the sky above transitioned from blue to deep purple. "Phantom 01, level at flight level 300, beginning handling evaluation," Elena reported as she reached her assigned altitude and began the series of maneuvers designed to introduce her to the F-22's flight envelope. The first gentle turns revealed handling characteristics that seemed almost magical compared to conventional fighters. The F-22 responded to her control inputs with immediate precision, while the flight control computers managed stability and performance optimization automatically. Elena felt like she was flying the machine that anticipated her intentions and translated them into perfect aerodynamic execution. "Try some steeper turns," Morgan suggested. "Feel how the aircraft handles at higher G loads." Elena banked into a 60-degree turn and felt the F-22 pull 4 Gs while maintaining smooth, controlled flight. The aircraft's response was so precise that she could hold exact bank angles and load factors without the constant control adjustments required in conventional fighters. The fly-by-wire system seemed to read her mind and execute maneuvers with mathematical precision. "Incredible," Elena breathed, momentarily forgetting radio discipline as she experienced the F-22's capabilities firsthand. "The handling is beyond anything I imagined." Morgan's laugh carried warmth and understanding. "Wait until you try the Super Cruise demonstration. That's when you'll really understand what makes this aircraft special." Elena advanced the throttles to Super Cruise power and felt the F-22 accelerate through Mach 1 without afterburners, achieving supersonic speed with fuel efficiency that conventional fighters couldn't match. The sensation of sustained supersonic flight was extraordinary, smooth, quiet, and controlled in ways that seemed to defy physics. At Mach 1.5, Elena looked down at the Nevada landscape passing 30,000 feet below and realized she was experiencing a capability that only F-22 pilots had ever known. The aircraft was sustaining supersonic speed without afterburners, covering ground at rates that compressed both time and distance in ways that transformed the tactical environment. "How does Super Cruise feel?" Morgan asked. Elena considered the question while maintaining precise flight parameters at speeds that would require afterburners in any other aircraft. "It feels like normal flight, but everything happens faster. The tactical implications are incredible." "Exactly right, Morgan." Confirmed. Super Cruise gives you control over engagement timing and positioning that conventional fighters can't match. You can close with threats or escape from dangerous situations at speeds that change the entire tactical equation. Elena spent the next 30 minutes exploring the F-22's flight envelope under Morgan's guidance, experiencing performance characteristics that redefined her understanding of what aircraft could accomplish. The jet's combination of power, agility, and precision created capabilities that seemed more like science fiction than current military technology. The weapons systems demonstration proved equally impressive as Elena learned to employ the F-22's internal armament while maintaining stealth characteristics. The weapon bay doors operated with mechanical precision that revealed and concealed missiles without compromising the aircraft's radar signature. Internal weapons carriage changes everything about tactical employment, Morgan explained as Elena practiced weapon bay operations. You can approach targets undetected, engage multiple adversaries, and aggress without revealing your position. Elena absorbed the tactical concepts while practicing procedures that would eventually allow her to employ lethal force with precision and stealth that previous generations of fighters couldn't achieve. The F-22's capabilities represented quantum leaps in military effectiveness that transformed air warfare from individual combat to strategic influence. The approach and landing phase tested Elena's ability to manage the F-22's energy while transitioning from high-altitude flight to ground operations. The aircraft's approach characteristics were surprisingly conventional, despite its exotic performance capabilities, responding to her control inputs with precision that made landing feel routine. "Beautiful approach, Phantom 01, the tower controller observed as Elena lined up with the runway centerline. "You're cleared to land." The F-22 touched down with mechanical precision, its advanced landing gear absorbing the impact while sophisticated. Braking systems brought the aircraft to a controlled stop. Elena had successfully completed her first flight in the world's most advanced fighter aircraft, proving to herself and her instructors that she could master systems that represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology. "Outstanding flight." "Phantom 01, Morgan transmitted as they taxied back to the ramp. "Your performance was exceptional for a first flight in the F-22. Elena felt a combination of exhaustion and exhilaration as she completed the shutdown checklist and prepared to climb out of the cockpit. She had achieved a milestone that seemed impossible just months ago, proving that her dedication and preparation had been sufficient to master the most challenging aircraft in the world. Colonel Reed met her at the aircraft as she completed the post-flight inspection, his expression revealing satisfaction with her performance. "Captain Vasquez, how did the aircraft handle?" Elena considered her response carefully, recognizing that her evaluation would influence future training decisions and her progression through the F-22 program. "Sir, the aircraft exceeded every expectation. The handling characteristics are extraordinary. The system's integration is intuitive, and the performance capabilities are beyond anything I've previously experienced." Reed nodded approvingly. "Your flight performance was exceptional, Captain. You demonstrated the kind of adaptation and professionalism that F-22 operations require. You're cleared for continuation training with more advanced maneuvers and systems employment." Elena felt tears threatening her professional composure as the reality of her achievement settled over her. She had successfully flown the F-22 Raptor, proving that women could master the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. The moment represented the culmination of years of preparation and the beginning of opportunities she had only dared to dream about. That evening, Elena sat in her quarters trying to process the day's experiences while maintaining the communication restrictions that prevented her from sharing her achievement with family or friends. She had flown the F-22 Raptor, but that accomplishment would remain hidden from everyone who had supported her journey toward this moment. The isolation was the price of breakthrough, and Elena was beginning to understand that proving gender irrelevance in military aviation would require sacrifices that went beyond personal recognition. She was carrying the hopes of future women who might never know her name or understand the barrier she had broken. But as she looked out her window at the F-22s parked on the Groom Lake ramp, Elena felt satisfaction that transcended personal recognition. She had proven something important to herself and to the military aviation community, even if that proof would remain classified for years or decades. Tomorrow would bring more training, more challenges, and more opportunities to demonstrate that excellence in flying had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with dedication, preparation, and the courage to pursue dreams that others considered impossible. Elena was ready for whatever came next. 2 years into her operational assignment, Elena made her choice. She met Dr. Harrison at the same coffee shop, this time carrying classified flight data that proved the F-22 systems had been deliberately compromised during Walsh's final mission. The evidence was irrefutable. Major Jennifer Walsh had been murdered to silence the first woman who proved she belonged in the cockpit of America's most advanced fighter. "We publish everything," Elena told Harrison, knowing she was ending her military career. "Walsh deserves justice, and future women deserve to know the truth." The story broke 3 months later. Congressional hearings followed, exposing the conspiracy that reached the highest levels of the Pentagon. Officials who had covered up Walsh's murder were prosecuted, and Elena's testimony became the catalyst for genuine integration of women into all fighter aircraft programs. Elena was quietly transferred to a desk job, her flying career effectively over. But 6 months later, she received an unexpected phone call. "Captain Vasquez, this is General Hayes. I have an offer for you." The offer was command of the newly formed 99th Fighter Squadron, an all-female F-22 unit established to honor Walsh's memory and demonstrate women's capabilities in air warfare. Elena would train the next generation of female fighter pilots, ensuring that no woman's achievements would ever be erased again. "We're calling it the Walsh Squadron," General Hayes explained. "Major Walsh's name will be on every aircraft, and her story will be told to every pilot who graduates from the program." Elena accepted immediately. Major Jennifer Walsh's ghost could finally rest. Her story would live forever, inspiring women who had dreamed of touching the sky. What do you think about Elena's incredible journey from maintenance officer to F-22, pilot to squadron commander? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of courage, determination, and fighting for justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories of people who refuse to accept limitations. Your support helps us bring you more amazing tales of human triumph.